So you starting on page 11 today?
I think so. Let's see where we are. Actually, I think we're on page 4. Yeah, we're on 4.
4?
Yep.
I ain't had a chance to go back and print that out.
Okay, in terms of the stuff, the deadlines remain unchangeable. So the Argument Basics assessment instrument, which again doesn't actually like hurt your grade. It's to gather data that goes into assessment, which then gets fed to the state, and they use to deny us our performance-based funding, because that's the way the system works. In terms of the graded stuff, the grade effective stuff, quizzes part 1, covering part 1, deadline is September 21st, end of day. Exam 1, quizzes part 2, October 19th, also end of day. And these are the
How
quizzes.
many quizzes in each book, in each section?
I got a bunch of them in there. I put, I think between at least 4, some I think of like 7 or 8. And the reason why is because the best 10 count. And so that way, if you can do as many as you want, you need 10 to get full grade, but you can do as many as you want. The more the better. Because each quiz, it's better than a lottery ticket because each one could be a winner. Probably one.
And well, they will help us with the exam?
Yeah, because they're similar. The questions, good question, because the questions for the quizzes also get pulled into the exams. So there's a chance you may see some overlap. Not guaranteed, but you could happen. And anyways, like doing the quizzes will help because it's the same material. Okay, so last time we're looking at the question of what is metaphysics, and we looked at the methodology. And kind of the common way to do it in the West is rather like buying a phone or a car, in which you lay out the pluses, the minuses, and then compare it. And whichever one gives you the most good stuff for the least cost, that would be, at that moment, the best theory. And as you might imagine, people can agree on the method, but disagree about which one is the best, because the scoring is not perfectly objective. And you can use an analogy to like politics. You could have people who agree on like some of the similar values, but disagree about how to, which plan is the best. So you have 2 people that honestly think, it'd be great if everyone could be employed and be doing well. And some people may think, well, the way to do that is have a high minimum wage and free college. And someone else may think, well, the way to do that is to have no minimum wage and have an expensive college. And they may, agree on the goal, but disagree about which plan is best. Same with metaphysics. So last thing we looked at was the notion of primitives. And we saw that the idea there is not primitive in the sense of being low tech, but in the sense of it's something that's left unexplained. It's like we don't explain that. And every theory is going to do that because if you try to explain everything, your theory would be infinite. You'd never stop explaining.
Is there a limit to the primitives that a theory might have or may be able to have?
Nope, in theory unlimited. Although it comes to the cost. So it actually reminds me of, I was at some conference and they were kind of joking, but every time someone asked them a question, they said, nope, I keep that as primitive. And then finally people were saying, is that primitive too? Because basically keeping it primitive, it's a fair move at first. Because, every theory has got to have something they don't explain, because you got to begin somewhere. But at a certain point it becomes kind of ridiculous. Yeah. That's like someone who's like really obnoxious, and they, oh, I didn't mean that. Oh, I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that. I didn't mean that. Eventually, like, at that point, like, they mean that.
One of the, maybe jumping ahead of ourselves, but when theories become law, does the unexplained become explanatory, or are they still unexplained?
They could eventually, some could become explained later, develop more, but in general, typically whatever is left unexplained at the start is often left unexplained at the
When it becomes
primitive.
law?
Because when you have the primitive, you're usually saying, I'm never, essentially you're typically saying, I'm never going to be able to explain this. Although you may later on, like if you come back to it, like later on, you might be able to, like to use like a concrete example, like if you're writing, suppose you're working on you write like an article about, and then you do like, you later think, oh, I can solve it, I can explain this. So maybe like in your later article or book, you would say, what I used to be able to not be able to analyze, now I can. You know? So that's I've explained that. And that's why people keep rewriting books. Now, so what are you trying to get from your theory in terms of the good stuff? Because most of this stuff is things you want to avoid. You want to have as few entities as possible. You don't want to be too complicated. Don't want to be weird. Want it to be plausible. Don't want to have too many primitives. And the main thing to get to is explanatory power and problem solving. Because the whole point of a metaphysical theory is to explain things, to solve problems. Like if you're trying to solve the problem of other minds, or the problem of trying to figure out like what is the mind, and your theory needs to be able to say like what the mind is, and it needs to explain stuff. So your theory should be able to say, given my theory, we can explain this, like how people work, or how space and time works. Just like with any theory, you should be able to take the theory and do things with it. So the more it explains, and the more problems it solves, the better. That power is good. And unlike political power, this doesn't corrupt you. You don't become corrupted by the explaining. I'm explaining all the things. No one can stop me. It's like, keep going. You're doing great. Oh wait. Unlike political power, it's like I'm doing terrible things. It's like, stop. Stop that. Now, in addition to what the theory is supposed to do, because if you're doing philosophy professionally, like grad school or beyond, you'll typically you'll take some type of like problem of multiple location, or what is the mind, or can virtual beings have minds, and you'll write the paper or the book trying to give an account of that, trying to solve that problem. Now, to use an analogy, like in business, like suppose you graduate, you do a startup, and you want to make a new smart device for people to wear. Now, what might happen in addition to solving the problem you set out to solve? Maybe you want something that doesn't just count steps, but also does some new thing that we don't know about now because it's going to be new. It's going to be your billion-dollar idea. Now, it may turn out that your idea has other spin-offs you didn't expect, and what they call that is, well, they call it spin-offs, but it's also called fruitfulness, meaning that you get other good stuff that wasn't part of your original project. For example, think of like a GPS, originally built for military purposes, but it had billions, trillions of dollars of spin-offs. You've got smartphone, GPS from your phone, GPS like you got one of the Garmin watches, all that, GPS navigation. And so that wasn't expected. Originally it was designed for military use, but now it had all this spin-offs. And so you might have a theory that has all kinds of cool spin-offs. And so when you're up there, nerding it out at a philosophy conference, you'd be like, in addition to solving this problem, I also have all these cool spin-offs.
But Professor, in metaphysics, which is dealing with the abstract, how do you measure your theories? Your findings, whether it's true, not true, what have you?
Couple answers. One is, from a purely practical standpoint, it would be, do you get like hired and do you get tenure? Do you get hired and do you get tenure? Be totally practical, like any. More philosophically, it would be, does it actually, you know, when people read it, do they say, yes, now I have a better understanding of how, you know, the mind works. I have a better understanding of what it is to be a person. I mean, to give like a real example, here's an area where it does have real consequences. One of my specialties is the ethics of virtual beings, which another reason I picked that is because that way I can write off my Xbox One games and deal with this. And Xbox One, because I'm doing research. Well, it gave me the idea was playing Fallout 3, because you get the character of Dog Meat, and it gave me an idea about the ethics of how you treat your companions, because we'll see this later, but most people who played Fallout 3, you get a virtual dog. And if you ever played, you know, video games, you have like NPCs, usually you use them just to soak up bullets, like, go get them, Ray, soak up those bullets for me, find those traps. But most people take the dog, the virtual dog, and they keep it at, you know, at home, even though it's using up a slot they could be using for someone else. And so one interesting, you know, practical effect of this is we're going to be building virtual people. And so one place where the metaphysics actually hits reality is how do we tell, how do we sort out when they become people, and how should we treat them? So one of the big areas of metaphysics now is the whole notion of virtual people, like virtual reality, and virtual, you know, artificial beings. And so we need to work out a theory of what it is to be a person, so that way we can try to decide when, like, Alexa becomes a person. Now, we can't really know for sure, but it's an important area, because otherwise, well, spoiler, this is how it ends. We never get them right. We treat the robots terribly, they kill us all. That's how it always ends. So, spoiler, enjoy it while it lasts. 2024, that's when it all ends. So get in fun. But yeah, so one example would be that. Another area would be where it worked out very well practically was they were developing theories of what is the nature of reality. And this guy, Democritus, came up with these ideas called atoms, little atoms in the void. And eventually that became what we now call particle physics, which has pretty clear implications. So one sort of irony about philosophy is, the metaphysics is, once you start actually really solving problems, people don't call it metaphysics anymore, they start calling it physics. And so when you really start getting things done, it becomes physics. But in order to get to the physics, you first got to do the metaphysics. So again, the whole thing of particle physics, you can trace nuclear power, or nuclear weapons, back to Democritus. And so I guess it worked out really well or badly, depending how you look at it. Similarly, theories about like space and time. If we ever develop, like in sci-fi, they have, you know, ships that can go faster than light. And if that's originating in metaphysical speculation, like the nature of dimensions and stuff, and if we're ever able to build that, that will arise out of metaphysics. So now it's just sci-fi metaphysics.
So you think that the games actually help them with the actual making of these different things?
Yeah. Yeah, so the spin-off stuff. So, for example, one spin-off of Democritus, there was nuclear weapons. I guess that's kind of bad. But we have them. Now, in terms of other things, the theory's got to have, got to be coherent, got to be consistent, and of course it can't run in a circle. A circle explanation is one where simply the phenomena is merely as you're stated. For example, if someone says, to use like a mundane example, if someone says, why can't Sally write? Well, Sally has writer's block. But writer's block is just what?
A state of the mind.
Yeah, you can't, it just means you can't write. So it's saying Sally can't write because Sally can't write, which is true, but not very useful. Theories can run into circularity because you might try to say, like, define identity in terms of identity. Sometimes it happens at a very large scale. For example, one of my professors, when I was starting my dissertation, he said, yeah, when I did mine, I did my first draft, and then he said, my advisor pointed out that my dissertation was circular, and the whole thing ran in a circle, and I rewrote the whole thing, and like, thanks for the encouragement. So in a metaphysical theory, So essentially what you do is if you're assessing an individual theory, you kind of check it against this. But typically theories are in competition. So for example, when it comes to philosophy of mind, there's all those competing theories, like what is the mind? Or what is time or space? And so it's sort of like it's like a basketball tournament. You have them, matched up against each other. But unlike basketball, it's not like you have the March Madness where you have like brackets. It's just like it's like a death match. They're all fighting each other. And in theory, the best one at that time wins. And then we develop some horrifying weapon from that theory.
So when you find something, do you patent it? So if anybody come after you, they have to pay you if they use your...
Weirdly, metaphysical theories usually don't get, well, it's not surprising they don't get patented, because you have to be able to show like application and use and stuff. By the time you get to a patent, you're typically way beyond what we call metaphysics. So Democritus came up with atoms, but he didn't patent atoms. But you could, I mean, in theory, if you did, like, develop something like a time machine using, metaphysical theories of time, you could patent that machine.
So you patent the machine, not the theory.
Yeah, although the patent law nowadays is really weird. You can copyright your books, and you may be able to patent some of the ideas, because Amazon used to have the patent on the idea of clicking once to order something, for real. They had one-click payment. And then, because back then they were just giving patents for everything, no matter what, even just obvious things. They're going back and revisiting them. So you probably could get a patent on something like metaphysics. I was going to say that'd be stupid, but law, that's not a...
Because you got to follow a pattern to get to the next step, right?
Yeah.
And if your theory is what going to take you to the next step and nobody else adds that, wouldn't that be your findings?
Yeah, I mean, you can, if you do create usually it'd be protected by a copyright.
That's what I'm saying.
The idea is, yeah.
Well, patent is a copyright.
Yeah, and if you did develop something like a device or something, then you could, or a method, you could patent a method. Like I said, you can patent ideas, like Amazon patented the one click, and there are a bunch of other ones out there that got patented as ideas you think, well, this is obvious, but why did they do that? And they did it back then because they were just canning out like candy back in the early age. And we're kind of nothing to do with metaphysics, but they're going back and trying to revisit a lot of that stuff. But it worked well for Amazon. So the idea is, you find when people are doing stupid stuff, you cash in on the stupidity, then you cash out before people realize how stupid it was. That's just good metaphysics. Okay, now we turn to, because essentially I said like the way we build these theories and decide whether like, should you take something primitive, is this got explanatory power, is by arguing for it. If you've had the logic class, critical thinking, or another philosophy class, if you've seen this stuff, so it'd be nothing new, but if you have not, it's the stuff you need to do the paper and the philosophical stuff. It is the brains of Western philosophy. Now, an essential tool of philosophy is the argument. To use a metaphor, it's to do philosophy without an argument would be kind of like showing up to play tennis without a racket, or trying to play basketball without a ball or net. I guess you can do it in your mind. Mental, like air guitar, mental basketball. There's people sitting there thinking. Could be a thing. Could be a thing. Now, in everyday life, when someone says they had an argument, what do they probably mean?
Disagreement.
Yeah, disagreement, fight, battle. Now, that's the normal usage. Not surprisingly, being an academic discipline, philosophy takes the normal term and makes a technical version. That's not to say the normal version is wrong. It's just that the philosophical definition is more rigorous, more strict. So here's the idea of an argument. In philosophy, an argument is not a fight or dispute or disagreement. It's a set of claims. And a claim is a statement that can be true or false. Now, it's not the same thing as a sentence, because a sentence could have many statements. So if I say, I got up this morning, went grocery shopping at Publix, came here to teach classes, it's one sentence, but there are multiple claims. Like I went grocery shopping, I went to was at Publix, I came here to my classes, and so you could jam lots of claims into one sentence. Now, these claims, instead of claims, there's two types or two flavors of these claims, namely the premise and the conclusion. So what are those? Well, a premise is the evidence or reason being offered. Offered for what? Well, the answer is this, the conclusion. The conclusion is the point being made, what you're trying to prove, what you're trying to establish. So that is, when you're making a logical argument, you get a point you want to make. And then you're giving reasons or evidence that supposedly prove or support that point. You're trying to logically show that it's true. Now, the objective of an argument philosophically is truth. Because people sometimes ask me, how do I win an argument? And I'll say, what do you mean by win? And they'll say, I want people to believe me. And I'll ask them, do you care if you're right or wrong? I don't care if I'm right, I just want people to believe me. Well, what they're talking about is persuasion. The objective of persuasion is people to believe you whether you're right or wrong, whether it's true or false. And so someone can be persuaded by about something that's totally not true. And in fact, which makes me sad, the worse the logic, usually the more persuasive something is. So good logic people find often unconvincing. And horrific logic, or no logic at all, people say, yeah, that's great. So if you want to persuade people, this is not what to use, which makes me sad every day. That for whatever reason, I guess one of those cruel ironies of the universe, good logic generally doesn't convince people at all. It's like the worst thing you can do.
What do you think logic doesn't convince people or persuade people?
Excellent question. My main thought is that people tend to more feel things, and logic doesn't make people feel. And so when most people, actually all of us, when we make decisions, we try to go by how we feel about stuff. And logic doesn't make people feel. Also, logic is hard. You gotta go through all the steps, and it's difficult and can be frustrating, and so people generally don't find it super appealing. I mean, to use an analogy, think of like doing like really rigorous exercise, like strength training or endurance training. Everyone knows that that's good for them. You ask anybody, is exercise good for you? Everyone says, yeah. Is a good healthy diet good for you? Everyone says, yeah. Why don't people do that? Yeah, it doesn't taste good. It's tough. It's tough to do, even though it's better. And I think the same kind of thing happens with arguments. Arguments are kind of like I guess they're kind of like the broccoli of the mind, or the strength or endurance training. Because it's good, but it's difficult. And bad reasoning is like Twinkies. Twinkies are delicious, easy and delicious. Twinkies don't judge you. They're always there for you. And so, yeah, people, they eat that junk food. And bad logic is like junk food, because it affects people's feelings and makes them feel so they're more likely to believe. Yeah, so if you're trying to win by persuading people, logic is terrible.
So you thinking you can come out to somebody with like the most logical conversation or response, and that is true, they would have to see it. I mean, not, of course, they would have to, they would force, but they would have to see that what you're saying is true for the best version of the conversation, I guess I'll put it to way.
Yeah, if someone is logical, if someone is rational.
Because it's hard to define logic, even though people do a very good job.
Yeah, like if someone is rational and you do present to them and they're willing to listen to you, you can get them to say, I don't like that, but I got to accept the logic, got to accept the truth. Typically what people do, though, ironically, is even if you provide them with a great argument, clear evidence, they'll double down. In fact, because one of the things they tested this, you've probably heard that now we're having cases of measles again, which is pretty much wiped. It's super dangerous. People think it's like, but it's super deadly. And the reason why is because people aren't getting vaccines. And they.
What is that? What is that? What?
Oh, measles? It's good that you don't know about it, because it typically infects children, but it involves like a fever and It's not always fatal, but it does a lot. It can be fatal. It's incredibly infectious. It has a high fatality. You're probably, we're probably all safe because we're like adults now. Probably all our shots. Really bad for kids because if the measles vaccine, you can't get it until you're a certain age, but of course you can catch measles anytime. And so some people have stopped doing vaccinations, and there's a strong anti-vax movement, and they try to figure out how do we convince people that vaccines are safe. And all the science is pretty clear. I mean, they're not zero risk. It is a risk, but the risk of disease is way higher. It's like wearing your seatbelt. Yeah, there's a chance your car could get in a wreck and get catch on fire and you can't get out of your seatbelt. Person I know actually died that way. It's terrifying. But the odds are that 99% of the time your seatbelt's going to be good, not bad. Same with vaccines. And they try to figure out a way, how do we convince people to accept vaccines? And they found that trying to argue with people, trying to use like logic and evidence, it made them double down. They were even more likely to reject vaccines. Same with politics. If you bring up evidence and facts to people that go against their view, they'll believe it even more strongly. So weirdly, not only does it not work, it reinforces their belief.
Is that kind of tied to sociology then?
Yeah. So it's like how people commit. They commit to an idea, and the more you prove they're wrong, the more they want to. The more they'll cling to it. The more. In fact, we have the term "double down." Is when people, in the face of evidence, they just don't give it up. Yeah. So if you're going to try to persuade people, unless you know the person's logical and reasonable, like it's an academic debate or something, then yeah, you don't want to use this logic stuff. So why then should you even bother with it? Well, here's why. If you're trying to solve problems as opposed to persuade people, get to the truth, then it's the best tool, because it won't always give you the truth. It's not perfect, but if you follow good logic, you're more likely to get things right. And we're all kind of good at this, because if we weren't, we wouldn't be here alive today. Yes, if you want to persuade people, you'd want to use rhetoric and fallacies. If you want to get to the truth, though, you'd use this. And so someone who's like a brilliant manipulator, they're good at both, because they're good at logic for figuring out things that they want to do, because they don't want to be stupid, but they're great at bad logic and rhetoric to sway others. That's a good skill sets to have. Now, so what would be a concise definition of argument? Well, argument is this. It is a set of claims, one of which, the conclusion, is supposed to be supported by the others, the premises, which provide the evidence or reasons. So the point being made is the conclusion, and the evidence is the premise or premises. You can have unlimited premises, kind of like breadsticks used to be, but one and only one conclusion per argument. Now, in terms of finding them, the questions are these. So if you're looking for somebody's argument, you'd ask, what is the point? Not in the sense of like, what's the point of this? But in the sense of what are they trying to establish? Now, a person could have a point, but no argument. So I might say, for example, parking should be better on campus. That's a point, but I've given no reasons. Now, if I give reasons, even if they're crappy reasons, as long as I give reasons, I would at least have an argument. So I say parking should be better, so people can, get to class, leave home later to get to class on time, or avoid the first station and drive around in lots. My solution is I park like a half a mile from campus and just walk here. I get a lot of steps, lots of steps. But I don't mind. I like walking. Not so much in the summer, but as I tell myself, I convince myself, I like walking. You enjoy this. So the conclusion asks the question is, what's the point? And the premises answer the question, what are the reasons given? Now, there are two main flavors of arguments plus bad flavor. First is the inductive, second deductive, the bad is known as the fallacies. Inductive arguments are the most common. We're all good at this, because if we weren't good at it, we'd be dead. We may not realize that we're good at it, but we are, because we would otherwise be dead. Now, inductive arguments, their hallmark, their defining characteristic is their arguments, of course. So you got evidence in a conclusion, and the evidence is supposed to support the conclusion, but their defining characteristic is this. Inductive arguments deal in probability. If they're doing what it's supposed to, true premises probably give you a true conclusion. Not guaranteed. Why? Well, the core feature of induction is you're leaping from what you've observed or know into the dark to something you haven't observed or don't know. To use an analogy, it's like, you know, if running in the dark and you're leaping over like a gully in the dark, or jumping across from one building to another in the dark, and what could go wrong if you're just leaping out into the darkness?
Falling on a piece of glass.
Yeah, death. It could be terrible. Fortunately, inductive arguments rarely result in death. Following them could be. So with the inductive leap, you're leaping from what you observed or know to what you haven't. Now, you may say, well, why would you do that? You know, well, the answer is sometimes that's the only option, because pretty much, as we'll see, pretty much all of life is inductive logic. You've got a limited set of information, and you're having to leap beyond that, typically to the future. So that'd be an example of a kind of everyday, typical inductive argument. Well, every time you get to a crosswalk, and you're thinking about what you're doing, you're running through inductive reasoning. Because, well, what do? Get to the crosswalk and you walk. Yeah, you walk, but hopefully before you walk out, you
look.
Yeah, you look, and you make a judgment about, you know,
Whether it's safe.
yeah, whether it's safe. So you see a car coming, and I've been hit by cars, so I'm super careful. Not a lot of damage. I got there.
So you hit by a car?
Oh yeah.
You just sped through that, like, oh no,
It was going pretty slow, and it was a big hood. If you roll, because the idea is, if you get hit by a car, if you can, you probably won't remember this, but what you try to do is you try to distribute as much of your body as possible. I mean, it sounds weird, but you want to get hit by, you want as much of your body, either none of your body or a lot of impact on the car, because it distributes. Because if you get hit and take all the impact on one point, take a lot of damage. But if you get hit by a car and throw up on the windshield, for example, if you're able to like splay out, and it's like, if you see people like who do martial arts when they fall, if you fall just like on your wrist, you're going to break your wrist. But if you do like a full body fall, you get hurt less. So this is a big car with a big hood. So as soon as it hit me, I threw myself like across the hood and just distributed all the impact and just rolled off to the side as they sped away. Of course they didn't stop.
Wow. Did they get damage to the car at least?
I got their antenna. on the way off.
So you didn't catch their license plate or anything?
Oh no, I was too busy trying not to die.
Yeah.
It was Ohio, of course. Ohio spent most of the time trying to kill me.
Wow.
But yeah, so like you step out in front of the, yeah, you go and you're judging, okay, the person's probably gonna stop. Because usually they do. And it's inductive reasoning because you're,
What?
yeah, because I notice most people, which always gives me like, I always feel like my heart stops for a second. I'm simply just like talking to the phone, just walk right into the traffic. And I'm just like,
Yeah.
and before I want to like warn them, but I'm like, they probably think I'm crazy. But they're doing inductive reasoning. Namely, they're reasoning, I've never been hit before, I'm not going to get hit again. And so they're going from their past experience to the future. But could they be wrong?
Yeah.
Yeah, because people do get hit.
You were wrong.
Yeah. I was wrong. They weren't supposed to stop. Well, they were kind of stopping, but they just sort of accelerated into me. They were trying. It's actually been, yeah, it's the third time that people have actually tried to hit me with cars.
Oh, they were trying.
I think so, yeah. Well, they can see me. It's not like they
Wait,
couldn't see
Tom, do
me.
you know these people?
No, that's
Ex girlfriend.
the thing. They had no reason to try to kill me because they did not know me. There was no reason. I
You
did
said
not.
that's in Ohio.
Ohio, all of my near deaths.
Don't you
Gotta stay
right.
away from
Yeah.
that.
If you go to Ohio, you will die. That's just the rule.
Real.
Ohio is super dangerous. So another example, not involving data, like with the phones. If you buy if you're a person who uses iPhone, probably using it for a while, and Apple's on like iPhone 10 or X, and they'll be on like maybe 11 or next. And if you say, well, I like my previous 10 iPhones, I'll get this new one, it'll be great. It's inductive reasoning, because you're going from what you observed, your past phones, to the new one. But the new one, of course, could be terrible. Maybe it'll like explode or catch on fire or something. Now, we also use inductive reasoning. To give a final example, moving on, is in polls and surveys. For example, we had the primaries recently, the election, and what they do, of course, beforehand is try to figure what's going to happen. They do all these polls. And according to the polls, who was supposed to be our Democratic candidate for governor? Yeah, she was a shoo-in. Strong political family, she's a senator, and who wasn't? Alumni of FAMU. So you too could be governor someday, maybe president. Could happen.
Could happen.
Could happen. Non-zero. And of course, people were shocked and amazed, just like with Donald Trump. All the polls said Hillary's going to win.
Don't go there now.
That's true. Yeah. Now, and what people sometimes are saying, well, you can't trust polls. Well, no, you can't trust polls because polls are generally right, but they're inductive reasoning, which means you could get all your evidence right. All those polls could be, yeah, and you make that leap because there could be something because when they poll people, there could be a difference between the survey and the actual voting. What might have happened was, what often happens in elections is kind of ironically, when someone is polling really well, the people are going to vote for them to say, oh, they're doing fine, I don't need to go, it's kind of rainy, I'm not going to go vote. And so they stay at home. And the people who are motivated to say, oh, my person's down in the polls, I got to get out there for them. And so that might have happened. People were probably going to vote for Gwen Graham, and I just said, oh, she's fine, I don't need to go in. And people supporting Andrew Gillum, like, we got to get up there, he's behind the polls, and he won. And so there was nothing wrong with the polls, probably. It's just inductive, it's that leap. Going from what you know to what you don't know. Now, inductive arguments, as we'll see, they get assessed in terms of being strong or weak, because they can come in degrees. Because they can be like really good or really bad. So, for example, if you're making predictions about the iPhone, next one coming out, Apple's got a pretty good track record. iPhones 1 through 10 have been pretty good. So the next one will probably be pretty good. If you have a brand new company coming out with a new phone, they have no track record, then the claim that the phone will be good will be less well supported because you have no evidence to base that on. Or as another practical example, suppose you're planning on going out of town for the long weekend, and you have a friend you've known for a long time, they've always been reliable. And you have someone you just met in class who says, yeah, I'll give you a ride to the airport. You don't know me, but I'll give you a ride. So who would you probably pick? Yeah, because you have evidence that they'll probably be there. Whereas the person you just met, you don't know. You don't know if they're going to show, you don't know how reliable they are. And so the quality of the argument depends on, the strength of the argument depends on how good the evidence is. So saying my friend who's never let me down for the past decade will be there, good argument. This random person I met in class the other day will be there. Maybe they will, but a pretty weak argument. They'll be there. I know they will. I met them 5 minutes ago. Now, what if you need certainty? You don't want any of this probability, any of this leap. Well, in this case, deductive arguments. Deductive arguments are arguments. So they have premises, get a conclusion, but their hallmark is they promise certainty. And they don't always deliver it, of course, because promises don't always come true, but they promise certainty. So a deductive argument says to you, hi there, a deductive argument. You give me true premises, I guarantee you a true conclusion. Now, if they really do that, and we'll see more of this in a bit, they're valid. If they don't, they're invalid. So deductive arguments give you they'll promise you complete certainty. You're doing what you're supposed to, you put in truth, you get out truth. And we do use this in real life, but less commonly, again, because it's so formal. And so,
What did you say about the deductive argument just now?
which part?
The part that you said the deductive argument gives.
Oh, absolute certainty, if they're doing what they're supposed to.
The uncertainties.
Yep, because if a deductive argument says, hey there, I'm deductive. Give me true premises, I guarantee a true conclusion. Now, they don't always give you a true conclusion, because they could be invalid, but if they're valid, they always do. So deductive arguments promise certainty. They promise if all the premises are true, then the conclusion must be true. Inductive arguments say, hey, you give me truth, I'll probably give you truth. But, can't guarantee it. And again, because sometimes, as they say, sometimes in life there are not.
Induction gives uncertainty.
Yeah, it gives you probability at best. And deduction promises certainty.
So both of them can lie.
Yeah, they both could be bad. You could have a bad inductive argument, you could have a bad deductive argument. Now, deductive arguments, they don't come in degrees. Inductive arguments, they're kind of like people. They come in degrees of reliability. Deductive arguments, well, it's like death. Things are dead or they're not dead. It's just, well, except for death, undead. We'll leave those out. So, deductive argument, they're either perfect or totally broken. For example, simple deductive argument. If today, premise 1, if today is Friday, tomorrow is Saturday. Premise 2, today is Friday, conclusion, tomorrow is Saturday. Now, assuming Saturday follows Friday, and today is Friday, what is the likelihood tomorrow is Saturday?
Say that again.
Oh, given that Friday is before Saturday, and today is Friday, given those two things, what is the probability tomorrow is Saturday?
100%.
Yeah, 100% chance of Saturday, given those assumptions. So in that case, good deductive argument. It delivers. If you put in, if today is Friday, and if Friday is followed by Saturday, tomorrow's gonna be Saturday. Now the logic is good, weirdly enough, even on days that are not Friday. So take this argument. If today is Monday, tomorrow is Tuesday. Today is Monday, tomorrow is Tuesday. The logic is still good. Yeah, still good logic. I mean, it's not perfect, but the logic is still good. Because the logic being good, as we'll see in a bit, is different from the claims being true. Because you have good reasoning about untrue stuff. Now, the deductive arguments, again, promise perfect logic. Now, there can be cases where the logic is not perfect. For example, premise 1. If Tallahassee is the capital of Florida, then it's in Florida. Premise 2, Tallahassee is in Florida. Conclusion, Tallahassee is the capital. Everything I said is true, but is that good logic? No, because you could use the same reasoning with sock shopping. If sock shopping is the capital of Florida, then it's in Florida. True. Sock shopping is in Florida. True. Sock shopping is the capital. Not true. Not until 2021. The great sock shopping rise. A lot of things in the future. Things change a lot. Yeah, so it'd still be a deductive argument. It would just be a bad one. Now, there are some logic books that they're kind of strict. They say if it's deductive, any argument that's not valid is not deductive. But the tradition has always been deductive can be good, valid, or invalid, broken. So the main difference is inductive arguments give you probability. They promise a degree of support less than complete. Deductive arguments promise complete support, that true premises guarantee true conclusion. So the hallmark of deduction is certainty. Now, this of course comes at a price, because with deductive arguments, your conclusion doesn't take you beyond your premises. You really just use what's in your premises and deduce, extract, distill what's already in there. So take the Friday-Saturday argument. If today is Friday, tomorrow is Saturday, today is Friday, well, the conclusion's already in there. You don't have to, there's no leap, you just kind of extract it out of it. It's like saying, there's 4 quarters and a dollar, so if you have a dollar, you've got the equivalent of 4 quarters. It's true.
Such a good outcome, guys.
Yeah. Now, the third flavor, the bad flavor, is the fallacy. Now, unfortunately, people often used informally. Fallacy often is also taken to mean like just being wrong about stuff. And, informal use is okay. But strictly speaking, since we already have a term for being wrong, which is being wrong, a fallacy is a mistake in logic. It's an error in reasoning, it's a bad argument. So you could have a fallacy where everything in it is true, everything is right, but the logic is still bad. In fact, there's something called a fallacy, where someone thinks that because something's a fallacy, that the conclusion's gotta be false. Like the Tallahassee argument I gave is a fallacy, it's a bad argument, but everything in it is true. Tallahassee is the capital of Florida, Tallahassee is in Florida. Capitals have to be in their states. So a fallacy just means bad logic. So it is an argument, but it's a bad one. So it's a weak inductive argument or an invalid deductive argument. Now there are some that are so common, like ad hominem, mind-drawing fallacy, moving the goalpost, etc. They get their own names, their own special names. But any argument that's, sufficiently bad would be a fallacy. Now, as I mentioned, fallacies are very useful as persuasive devices. If you watch, if you follow politics and watch the news at all, you'll just see fallacies just raining down, just like everywhere. It's like, in fact, there are some, commentators and talking heads. It's just they're just fallacy machines. Just like I'm just watching them, just like look at those fallacies just flowing out of them. They're like fallacy geese. Just, the reason why they do that is, of course, you may say, "Oh, are they stupid?" Well, in some cases, yeah, but in most cases, they're smart because they know that getting up there and using, logic is just not going to convince anybody, almost anybody, except for the philosophy people. But the fallacies are going to work great. Or, for example, if you've been following Rudy Giuliani defending Trump, the one technique that's been used in Trump's defense, it's a standard one. I mean, pretty much all politicians employ it. It's called moving the goalposts. And the idea is basically, if you're arguing with someone, the idea is that if you show like if you're disputing, you show like a certain thing, then you already have like a set victory condition. Moving the goalpost involves always changing it, so if you establish your point, they just switch the goal. So, I mean, for example, at first it was, there was no collusion, then it becomes, collusion's not a crime. And the idea is that every time someone establishes a point, you just keep, and the reason they call it moving the goalpost is because it's like you come across the what you think is the goalpost, the line, and score the point. They say, oh, no, you have to keep going a little further. But it's very, it can be very effective because if someone's on there and really sticks to it, people will go, yeah, they didn't, at first they'll be like, there was no collusion, then they'll be like, collusion's not a crime, and then whatever it is. Yeah. So if you want to persuade people, fallacies actually are the best. Scare tactics, where you try to invoke fear to get people to accept claims. Ad hominems, just calling people, just attacking people and then rejecting their claims.
So you use a fallacy, but it would be inaccurate information of like conversation.
Right, because a fallacy is always bad logic. So even if the person is saying, they may say true things, because a fallacy doesn't mean that what they're saying is not true, different from truth, but it's bad logic. And they're often combined. People often combine bad logic with untrue information.
Who would be the people you would say they usually use fallacy? Who would be the type of people that you would say use fallacy?
Oh, everybody uses them. But most common, would be politicians use them a lot. If you turn on the news shows, if you're watching like the news, they'll be cranking them up. People who are spokespeople, commercials.
Corporations.
Yeah, corporations, everything.
You say they use them, they may use them because they may feel like the logic won't appeal to who's ever listening.
Yeah, I mean, some people use them, they could be used with benign intent, because you may believe you're in the right, and you're like, you may know, like, I can't convince people with logic. So you may just say, I'm gonna just use rhetoric and fallacies. Most of the time though, it's done maliciously. Because usually people who are like good people, they're kind of reluctant to use like bad reasoning to convince people because they feel kind of bad about that. And but terrible people have no qualms, so they're happy to use bad logic to
All
convince
they
you of
want
bad
to do is
news.
win that point.
Yeah, they just want to win. And fallacies are a way to win. Okay, speaking of winning, weekend's coming up, so have a good weekend. And as predicted, the rain stopped. So, yeah, it did. So see you on Wednesday, because Monday's a holiday. You too.